Thank you, David.
Okay, welcome everyone. Right, so following last week with the fairly broad overview of the region of Bordeaux, tonight is the first, the second session is the first session that we are delving into deeper details. So we're going to look, I'm just looking at my other screen, so just reminding you that as per last week, if you see me looking away, that's just I'm looking at the other screen. So today we're looking at the right bank, which is on the right side of the river, as we discovered last week. So we're looking at the AOC, so the Appellation d'Origine Contrôlée of the right bank. We'll also include the satellite appellations. And what are satellite appellations? We'll cover also producers of notes. In the past, running this Bordeaux Simplified course, it's people have benefited from hearing of some of the up and coming producers, and then also some of the well-established producers. Because it's all good and well to know just the top end, but it's also nice to know what who's doing what in the more let's say affordable price category as well, and that just gives everyone with different means to be able to make decisions based on just make more informed decisions, I guess. Because Bordeaux has been seen rightly so, I guess, as a nice investment in terms of wine region, but there's also many wines that are made to be enjoyed in the youth and the like. So we'll have a look at all of that. We'll also cover the right bank classification. So in fact just the Saint-Emilion classification, which has had a bit of a revamp in the last 12 months, not quite 12 months in fact. And then we'll talk about the differences between the business of the business culture of between the right bank and the left bank, because historically speaking they're quite different. Then we'll cover the sweet wines of Bordeaux, and hence there's a little half bottle of Sauternes there, to help you through the next couple of hours. And as I said to you last week, and don't hesitate to have a glass of wine while I'm talking. I'm doing the same as you. So I'm on to white tonight, but that's just for the moment. Anyway, and then obviously we'll talk about the wines that we have in front of us afterwards. So right bank of Bordeaux is split really in two distinct areas. The what we call the Libournais. And Libournais is just got its name after the town of Libourne, which is on the river there in Pomerol. You can see how small this area is in terms of quality, in terms of quality vineyards. What is interesting in the Libourne area, you can see just to the south, just to the bottom of those pink patches, is the Dordogne River, and how it's snaking around and meeting the Garonne just further upstream. What's interesting is Libourne, like Bordeaux itself. Libourne is a port that was it's a port town that was really kind of the center hub for shipping wines, upstream from the Dordogne area and so on. Bergerac wines and quite a lot of food come from there, and cows and so on. Will ship down to the Dordogne, meet in Bordeaux, and then ship to further export a lot further than that. So you can see if you compare to some of the appellations that we looked at last week on the left bank especially, and we will again next week, is the size of the appellations is quite small. The big one here, and one of the smallest one is Pomerol. You can see it's the one, the hot pink, that hot pink spot with just says Pomerol above it. That's probably one of the most expensive piece of land that there is in the right bank. Some of the world's most expensive wines come from that part of Bordeaux, and notably Petrus and Le Pin Lafleur, all those very famous names with bottles of wine going for north of $10,000 a bottle, come from that part of Bordeaux. Probably the most famous appellation out of the right bank would be Saint-Emilion, and that's simply because the village of Saint-Emilion is very, very touristy and quite a beautiful landscape to visit. It makes some amazing wines, also very premium, but also some not so premium wines in terms of price point. So we will cover that. And then what we call the satellite appellations, essentially like a satellite that goes around the Earth. Well, you have satellite appellations of Saint-Emilion, which are quite simply put the appellations around Saint-Emilion that can use the name of Saint-Emilion appended to the name of the village. So Montagne, the village of Montagne, it can be called it can call its wine, excuse me, Montagne Saint-Emilion. You have Saint-Georges Saint-Emilion, Puy-Seguin, Saint-Emilion, and then Lussac. So four villages. And then when it comes to Pomerol, you have Lalande de Pomerol. And then technically speaking, Fronsac and Canon-Fronsac are not satellites of Pomerol, but I kind of classify them as such because they're very similar in style. They often make wines that can rival the wines of Pomerol, but at a fraction of the price. And then the other part of the right bank is what we call the Blaye and Bourg. It's just the names out of two towns. Bourg is a small town, or probably more a village, to be honest. And then Blaye, which is quite a famous village there. Actually, I lived for a few years there when I was a lot younger. And it's got a citadel, so it's a fortified village that was built in the Viking era. It started as a fortress against the Vikings, and then it was modernized and expanded after the 100 Years' War, when the French got the Aquitaine region back from the British after 300 years, and that was to keep the English away from coming back to Bordeaux. So this part of Blaye and Bourg or this part of the right bank, should I say, is a lot more kind of lower end style of wine, especially in Blaye, which is the lighter blue color. You got some lovely drinking wines. When I say drinking, I'm just what we call quaffers here in Australia. Just the easy to drink white, rosé, and some of the lighter reds as well. That you would typically find mainly in bag-in-box. Over in France, there is a lot of, in Europe in general, bag-in-box quality tend to be very, very good. And Blaye is a very good example of that. So you can see, how it spreads in between the two kind of halves of the right bank, and that kind of light orange, kind of pinky stretch of land in between the first slide where you can see the Livournais, and then the second slide with Blaye and Bourg. That is just a land forest essentially. So there's not really any vineyards of note in between. And you really from Bourg to Libourne, it's just about a 25-30 minutes drive. So it's not that far. But you can see really when you think about it, when we talked about the local climates last week, and how the proximity to the ocean obviously is a lot further from the ocean than it is compared to the left bank. So the climate is quite different. The land is a lot more undulating, and therefore it really dictates the grape varieties that are planted and the style of wines as well that are made. So this is just a little view for those of you who haven't been to Saint-Emilion, and now I'm sure after seeing this slide you will all want to go to Saint-Emilion. It's just a view from where the clock tower is, or the bell tower, not the clock tower, excuse me, the bell tower of Saint-Emilion, and that millions of people go to this village every year. And from there you can have this is a view southward towards the river, and from there you can view kind of the extent of the undulation of the area, and it really has a big impact on the style of wines, which I will explain to you now. As I said last week, it's Bordeaux not so simplified, okay? Because we are going into a bit of detail, but it's a lot of fun to be able to share this knowledge with you, because hopefully you understand how those different especially in Saint-Emilion, the different terroir have an effect on the style of wine, and in fact the price point as well, because there are some more noble terroir than others, and the four main styles of terroir for Saint-Emilion. You have what we call the age of the escarpment, which is essentially Saint-Emilion is a village on top of a limestone, what we call a plateau of limestone, and then you have the age of the escarpment, which is where the plateau finishes, and then you have the foot of the escarpment, which is the valley floor essentially, and then you'll have the plateau, and then you have a completely different area of Saint-Emilion, which we call it the northwest corner for tonight's purpose, which I will illustrate for you in images, with 4 images. So the edge of the escarpment is where the plateau finishes, and this is where you get pieces of limestone that have eroded over time and turned into a bit of gravel and shale and not shale, sorry, loam and so on. And then really kind of with over the decades and centuries, kind of just fall down the hill and create this complex soil profile. Then you have the foot of the escarpment, which is again, it's kind of the continuation of the edge of escarpment, but just the gravels are a lot thinner. The limestone has kind of eroded to the point of being sandy, and turns into has a very different effect. It's got a lot more less water retention prowess. It's a lot more the water filters through down to the waterbed. So it's kind of a lot more free draining soil compared to the top of the escarpment and the plateau. The plateau to the north of the town is essentially, or traditionally referred to as the best part of Saint-Emilion, and simply put is because the limestone is like a sponge. In winter it will absorb a lot of water from the rain. It will store that water during the dry part of the month, so summer, and it will give the water back to the vines over time. Very in years like we discussed last week, we talked about 2022 as a vintage which was very, very hot and dry. Well, it really helped, that kind of terroir really helped vines to not suffer from hydric stress. They made some of the best wines of Bordeaux in 2022 came from Saint-Emilion as a result, because vines really didn't suffer from hydric stress as they would in other parts of Bordeaux. So that's really, that's why the traditional part of the best part of Bordeaux, of Saint-Emilion traditionally, is what we call the plateau. And then we have the northwest corner, which is a gravel terrace, and I will explain to you in a second when we slide through the next few images. So this is Chateau Ozon, so the edge of the escarpment, and you can see this is a car park of Chateau Ozon, which is one of in fact the most expensive Saint-Emilion there is. And you can see there is vines just above the car park, and the clay's overlayer is just it's about 30 centimeters deep. So 30 centimeters deep is nothing. Okay, it's like, can you imagine how low, how shallow the ground is, because after that is rock solid limestone. And then where you can see the doors there, it's just entries to some of the quarries. Saint-Emilion has got about 200 kilometers of tunnels under the appellation of Saint-Emilion, and these tunnels were because they quarried the limestone to build the town of Bordeaux essentially. So you can actually, if you've never been to Saint-Emilion and you're planning to go, I can definitely help you to go and visit some of those tunnels, because it's really fascinating when you walk in those tunnels. you know, if you rub your hand on the side of the tunnel and then you smell it, it's kind of that wet limestone, and you get that in some of the older style of Saint-Emilion, the older, not style, but older wines or Saint-Emilion. As they age, they really kind of share that minerality in the wine that you know, can be overshadowed with by oak and fruit initially. But that's really kind of it's a perfect picture to understand what's the edge of the escarpment. And then we go to Chateau Pavie, and Pavie is on the foot of the escarpment. So, you know, looking up, if you could look up across that wall where the pine tree is, the village of Saint-Emilion is on the other side of that wall. So it's really downhill, and here the soil is a lot is a bit deeper, and can in part be about 1 meter deep of clay versus 30 centimeters at the top. So, you know, it really has a big effect on the vines, because the vines, the harder it will work to get nutrients, the more concentrated the grapes are going to be. So the style of the resulting wine will be very different. Then you have one. This is a picture that I always and about showing it or not, but because, you know, it doesn't show the landscape, but it's actually this is from Chateau Tour Saint-Christophe, and I love showing that picture because it's literally a kind of a doorway into one of the terraces. You know, they got terraces in the vineyard, which is a kind of like, you know, giant staircases, and they've kind of made this doorway into the terroir. And it's actually really, really interesting because why? You can see the first kind of a top third of top half, should I say, of the soil profile. This is clay, is red clay. And then just underneath that, in the middle, sandwich in the middle, you have a layer of limestone. And then to the bottom half, this is the blue clay, what we call crasse de fer in French. And, you know, if you talk to Pomerol producers, they'll tell you that Pomerol is the only appellation in the right bank where you have blue clay, but actually no, you have kind of those outlet of blue clay that kind of manifest themselves throughout the Saint-Emilion appellation as well. The particularity of the blue clay is its iron content. So the reason it's blue, it's actually it's oxidized iron. So it gives to the wine some flavors that remind us of a little bit of kind of, I call that sanguine. You know, like, you know, if you have a paper cut and you lick your finger, that kind of obviously the blood flavor that imparts. The blue clay imparts the same kind of flavors to the wine, especially with a bit of age. You will get that in, you know, the famous names of Petrus or La Conseillante or Vieux Château Certain, but in Tour Saint-Christophe you get it as well with a bit of age. So, you know, you don't have to spend $10,000 a bottle to actually get that flavor. That's what I'm trying to say. But the crasse de fer, so that iron-rich blue clay, that iron oxide blue clay, is the other particularity is that it's got even more water retention than limestone. So the limestone, any water that will filter through the limestone in the middle, that is sandwiched in the middle there, you know, will get into the blue clay. And the particularity of that blue clay, it doesn't crack when it's dehydrated. You know, like a lump of clay, if it's completely dehydrated through summer, will crack, and it can actually hurt the root system of the vines. But the blue clay does not crack. It just stays like that, compact. So the root systems of the vines does not get damaged. And that's why, you know, it's one of those clay that, one of those subsoil profile that you know, people talk about, or chateaus talk about, and, you know, say it's thinking it's the best thing ever, because, well, it kind of is. But I mean, you know, some chateaus will claim that it's only them that have it, but no, it is found all throughout the right bank of Bordeaux. Then Chateau Cheval Blanc, actually, yeah, Chateau Cheval Blanc is a part of the plateau. It's on the northwest of the plateau of Saint-Emilion, and this is very flat here. But what I want to show you is on here, because Chateau Cheval Blanc is on the top left of that slide. So you can see, I mean, it's only 6 minutes drive from the village of Saint-Emilion, but the difference is huge, because this map, this topographic map, is really interesting because it shows how hilly Saint-Emilion is. But then on the top left corner is where Château Figeac and Cheval Blanc are. There's of course other chateaux, and it's just that those two are the most famous of that part of Saint-Emilion. And what is interesting is that on that top corner of the slide, on the other side of where Cheval Blanc and Figeac is the appellation of Pomerol. And Pomerol used to be a tiny island million years ago. Okay, I'm talking millions of years ago. And what do you have around an island? You have sand and gravel. Okay, so essentially where Cheval Blanc and Château Figeac are is the old kind of sand and gravel belt that lies around the old island of Pomerol. And the gravel and sand is typical to the left bank of Bordeaux, not really much the right bank of Bordeaux. So it does have an effect on what grape varieties are planted. For the majority of Saint-Emilion, the king of grapes there is Merlot. Okay, it's been backed by Cabernet Franc, and then in more recent years, Cabernet Sauvignon, because thanks to global warming, climate change, it ripens better. Having said that, Cheval Blanc and Figeac have always had a higher Cabernet content, both Sauvignon and Franc, compared to Merlot and compared to the rest of the appellation because of that gravel belt that is around. And Cabernet Sauvignon, as we discussed last week, loves that gravel soil that reflects the sunlight and stores that warmth during summer. Pomerol, as I said, is a plateau now, but used to be an island. It has a thin layer of gravel, and then the rest is clay. There is very rare occasions where there is limestone in Pomerol. It's really very deep clay under the gravel. And as I said about that iron-rich clay, the crasse de fer, which I showed you about the blue clay before. Well, the particularity of Pomerol is being such a compact clay soil. It's a very cold soil. So in spring it takes a lot longer to ripen, and as a result, traditionally speaking, Merlot has always been the best grape variety there because it is a soil that takes a lot longer to warm up. Merlot can over-ripen in very hot years, but with that crasse de fer, that blue clay underneath, and then the deep clay that has a lot of water retention prowess, it really does help vines to ripen slowly and produce some amazing Merlot. It is interesting because it is the smallest appellation of Bordeaux. It's only 800 hectares, and when you think about it, 800 hectares is in acres is about about 1,800 acres. So it's not it's not huge, but when you put it into context, Chateau Lafite Rothschild in Pauillac is 90 hectares. So it's over a tenth of the appellation of Pomerol. So it kind of puts things into perspective. Further west, the soil of Pomerol tends to be a little bit less clayey, but more sand and gravel, and that's really getting towards the town of Libourne. And the soils the wines kind of have a lot less finesse in that area. You then go into Lalande de Pomerol and so on. And that's the kind of soil profile that you find in Pomerol. This is what we call the hallowed ground of Petrus, which is one of the most expensive wines in the world, and rare as well, quite rare. So that's the example of the ground. The top layer is kind of those rocky pebbles, but then the rest is just clay, a lot, very deep clay. What is interesting is if you cast your mind to last week when we looked at the training of vines on the left bank, where the vines were quite low to the ground because of the the producers wanting the grapes the bunches to hang just over the gravels, so they can have that reflection of the light during the day, that warmth being given back during the night for the Cabernet. But remember that on the left bank, it's more sandy, gravelly, and so it's a lot more free draining soil. On the right bank, especially in Pomerol, the water, the grounds can get waterlogged very quickly, especially in spring if there's a bit too much rain. And what happens if it gets waterlogged? You know, you don't want any, essentially you don't want any of your canopy or your bunches to hang too close to water, because then you have disease pressure and fungal pressures and so on. So it is quite it's quite interesting to think about that. You know, people say, oh, maybe on the right bank they think about OHS a lot more, you know, and they don't want people to break their back picking grapes. It's got nothing to do with it, I can guarantee you. It's really about you know, the viticulture adapting to its soil profile. And why do I go? Don't forget the satellites, you know, with three exclamation marks. Well, we are all wine consumers. We are all wine lovers. Otherwise, obviously, we won't be here this evening. And you know, when you have appellations like Saint-Emilion or Pomerol making wines that are, you know, fantastic, of course, but you know, that comes with a sometimes often a heavy price tag. You know, it's always interesting, and this is really, I believe, the root of why we're doing this the Bordeaux Simplified course, because it really to help you as the consumers and as the wine amateurs to get to delve a little bit deeper than just the Saint-Emilion and Pomerol appellation, or just the Margaux and the Pauillac appellations. It's to get those peripheral appellations that will often give you better value for money wines, you know, at in the reasonable price category, and often will make better wines than the most basic of Pomerol or Saint-Emilion. It's simply put, you know, a basic Saint-Emilion, you know, a lot of the producers are not encouraged to strive to make better wines, because they don't have to. They rest on the fact that they are Saint-Emilion. Everyone knows Saint-Emilion. You know, not as many people know Castillon or Fronsac or Canon Fronsac. So you know, those people that work in those appellations have got to work extra hard, make, you know, the best wines that they can, and often they make better wines than basic Saint-Emilion. So you know, in terms of value for money, this is a great winner for everyone, really. So you know, as I said before, you know, you have Fronsac and Canon Fronsac, and in fact, those first two appellations, they were more famous than Pomerol over 100 years ago. Pomerol was you know, a land where, you know, corn, tobacco, and other crops were grown. Vines was not as it is now, you know, and Fronsac and Canon Fronsac were making wines of better repute than Pomerol. Castillon is one of those appellations that I've been a fervent defender of, because it is essentially the continuation of Saint-Emilion plateau, and often you will get much better value for money wines in Castillon than you would in Saint-Emilion, and in terms of quality, you know, really exceptional wines. Lalande de Pomerol, again, is the continuation of the Pomerol appellation. It doesn't make wine as refined as Pomerol, but certainly, you know, again, very good value for money in the best vintages. And then you have the four satellites of Saint-Emilion, as we discussed earlier, you know, Montagne, Puy-Seguin, Lussac, and Saint-Georges Saint-Emilion. And then we have the Bordeaux Supérieur appellation and Bordeaux AC that I will touch on on the next slide. Bordeaux Supérieur is an appellation that essentially that encompasses the entire region of Bordeaux. Okay, so it is an appellation that is a little bit outdated, to be perfectly honest with you, because Bordeaux AC and Bordeaux Supérieur in the old days, you know, up to 30 years ago, was quite relevant, because, you know, back in the days where grapes went ripening every year, and Bordeaux Supérieur was essentially, you had to have 0.5 of a degree more alcohol in the wine to be classified as a Bordeaux Supérieur compared to AC Bordeaux. These days, it's not really relevant anymore, because both, you know, everyone ripens, or most of the time over ripens their grapes. But I mean, it is an appellation that, as I said, covers all of Bordeaux, but really, typically speaking, will only be used in the Entre-deux-Mers area. Remember the Entre-deux-Mers area from last week, the big green patch? Well, this week is it's the same color, is red, but it's between the two rivers. Okay, it's a massive expanse of land in between the Garonne and the Dordogne. That's the piece of land where most of the Bordeaux Superior is grown, and then the Entre-deux-Mers white wines that we discussed last week. Typically speaking, it is really closest to the river Dordogne where the best Bordeaux Superior are made. Okay, because there's kind of those alluvial soils, so gravel, and then there's clay, and in some parts some limestone as well. So you really have gained a lot of complexity out of making wines closer to the Dordogne River. Aha. Now, before we get into that, do we have any questions so far? I have the chat box next to me, so I can see if you want to type questions. There is no problems at all. Otherwise, we move on to the Saint-Emilion classification. So remember last week I was saying we've got multiple classifications in Bordeaux. Next week we'll talk about the 1855 classification and then the Cru Bourgeois classification. On the right bank there is only one classification, and it's the Saint-Emilion one. Pomerol doesn't have one. And Saint-Emilion classification started in 1955, so 100 years after the left bank one, and it was instigated to kind of, I guess, rival the left bank classification, try to set up a system where the best ones will be at the top, and of course filter down to the not so good ones, and the good idea, in principle, was to have it revised every 10 years. But if you look closely, the latest classification was last year, 2022. So you can see that obviously it's, it hasn't been revised every 10 years. It's been revised more often than that. And that's simply because up until the 2012 classification, there were some, the new classification was usually followed by many lawsuits from unhappy chateaus who perhaps felt that they were shortchanged and the likes. Okay, up until 2012, there were only two Premier Grand Cru Classé A, the A classified first growth, which was Cheval Blanc and Château Ozon. They were the traditional Premier Grand Cru Classé A of the appellation. In 2012, they were joined by Angelus and Pavie. And in 2022, some wanted to make some noise and say, we're stepping aside from the classification altogether. We don't want to be part of it anymore. And those two were Ozon, Cheval Blanc, and Angelus. So last year made a lot of noise. A lot of ink was used to cover all the stories and the drama of why those chateaus wanted to step out of the classification and so on. But here we are. These days we have two of at the very top of the pyramid, which are Figeac and Château Pavie. And then you have 12 of the B category, and then 71 as the Grand Cru Classé category. And the intricacy of this appellation is that in Saint-Emilion, the classification covers the terroir. It classifies the actual property itself, but its vines as well. If you want to buy, and if you want to expand your vineyard and buy more land, you cannot put the vines that comes from those new lands that you've bought into your top wine. You've got to make a different wine for a duration of 10 years minimum until that wine gets tasted and fulfill the criteria of selection that I've put in front of you on that current slide. And then if that wine is then granted a promotion at the same level as your chateau, then you can include it into your property and then include it into your wine. This is a big difference compared to the classification of the left bank that we will discover next week, which classifies the estate itself, the name, but you can add land from anywhere within your appellation to produce more of your wine. So some say, and that's in case some of you are interested to know why those big names left the appellation. And I can tell you, they didn't leave the appellation to make their wines cheaper, because Chateau Cheval Blanc, who left last year the classification, has released the new vintage on Tuesday this week, and the price is 20.5% up compared to last year. So it's not about price point. It's more that for them, the limitation of obviously being able to make more of the top wine, as I said just before, with the limitation of the classification, they can't expand as fast as they want. So that's one of the reasons why they've left word on the street anyway. They will not admit to that, of course. They will admit that they don't agree with the criteria of classification, but that is their excuse anyway. So the way that the classification is covered is for the Grand Cru Classé, the 50% of the final score is about the tasting of the wines, but after that it's about the reputation, how it's distributed, the value of the wine, so how expensive the wine is essentially, the estate, the terroir, the how healthy the vines are, how healthy your soil is, and the practices of the estate. So are you organic? Are you sustainable agriculture? Are you biodynamic? It's all of this come into play. So it's quite a big set of criteria. And then for Premier Grand Cru Classé, you can see the tasting part is down to 30% compared to 50%, and then the reputation is 35%, meaning your price point, how famous your chateau is, and so on. So it's a little bit of a waffle, and it's not only about the wine itself and the practices of the estate. It's a lot about also reputation and price point, which is I think it's a bit sad, but we all have our opinions, I guess. But it's kind of a funny classification as it is. And as I said on the last line in red, there's no classification for Pomerol, and who would begrudge them for that? Because everybody's at the same level, and everybody does their best, and it seems to be working for them. Forgive me if you see my cat on the back of me. Traditional business and distribution is really interesting, actually, because the left bank, so the left bank of Bordeaux, so the Médoc essentially, and the Pessac-Léognan area was traditionally mainly UK, and then later in the 1700s the US came to play as well. But whereas the right bank, Germany, Holland, Belgium, the Benelux countries, obviously two very different demographics. So why do you think is this? And I'm asking a question, so if you want to answer, please feel free. Otherwise, I'll just keep talking. But essentially, if you think about it, and as we covered that last week, with the England being kind of occupying that side of France for 300 years. They actually got stuck on the river there. They actually didn't get to Libourne as much. And if you're a history buff like I am, you'll know that the English were defeated in Castillon after the 100 Years' War, and that's really kind of the heart of the right bank producing area. And so really the trade of Bordeaux was established by the British. And that really just included the left bank of Bordeaux. The right bank was very different style of wines as well, mainly because of the climate being different. It's bigger style of wines, more alcohol, riper, and that's kind of fitted the market for Germany and Holland and Belgium, where really they were after more heavy wines. Whereas the British were, they were after what we call the claret, and a lot of the British still call them claret because they were lighter style of Bordeaux. So it's just basically historical factors. So as we touched on in terms of the varieties, this is a bit more details in terms of the breakdown of varieties on the right bank of Bordeaux. Merlot is really, and these are the latest figures as well, by the way. And so it is decreasing. It's decreased 2% or in the last 5 years. So it's slowly decreasing, Merlot, but it's still, you know, as you can see, pretty much 3/4 of varietal planting is still quite a high ratio. It's early ripening, as I said before, and gives a lot of fruity flavor to the wine, you know, raspberry and red fruit in general. And it's quite a big grape, so its juice to skin ratio is about half of what Cabernet Sauvignon is. So, you know, it has a lot less tannins and it produces a lot more juice. So it can also be, it can also have produce a lot more alcohol as well. So, you know, on a hot year, Merlot is often giving wines that can be over 15% alcohol. So, you know, this is why it's slowly decreasing. Cabernet Franc is one of those what we call insurance policy grape variety, because it ripens just after Merlot and before Cabernet Sauvignon. So it you know, in case you have the traditional rain that would come in towards late September, which now, you know, happen any time really, but in the wisdom of old dictates that, you know, the end of September you needed to have olive fruit in because rain was coming. So Merlot ripens every year. Cabernet Franc would ripen most year, and then Cabernet Sauvignon depends if the rain came or not. But Cabernet Franc gives a lot of floral aspect to the wines, and this year, with the 2022 on tasting, you could really see the importance of Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon in the blends of the Red Bank, because they really increased the proportion of the blend with the both Cabernets and gave wines with a lot more floral characteristics, you know, rose petals and violet and so on. And in Cabernet Sauvignon, you know, as I've said a few times now, traditionally did not ripen on the right bank, but now with global warming, it's certainly ripening, and it's now adding a lot more of the backbone to the wine. So if you think about, you know, the Merlot being the flesh, you know, the Cabernet definitely the skeleton. You know, it gives tannins, it gives less alcohol, it gives deeper color to the wines, and makes wines that are often better than the sum of their parts. In 2021, so a couple of years ago now, some new varieties were allowed. New non-Bordeaux varieties were allowed to be planted, and you know, it kind of was very controversial because you know, the French, as you probably know, don't like change very much, and you know, to include grape varieties from not non-Bordeaux grape varieties, but also non-French grape variety like Touriga Nacional and Arina Arnoa made some you know, pretty bad press. This, though, I will stress that it was only for Bordeaux Supérieur appellation and the Bordeaux AC. So it really is something that, you know, you need to remember. It's not, you're never going to see a Grand Cru Bordeaux with a non-Bordeaux grape variety, or not in our lifetime anyway. But you will potentially see some Bordeaux Supérieur with part of that blended in. Now they're only allowed to do 10% of all plantings with those non-Bordeaux grape variety, and 5% of the final blend. So really, it's kind of me being brutally honest, and I've had this discussion with a couple of chateau owners in recent time. They're saying that it's a failed attempt by the authorities to try and combat climate change, because essentially those grape varieties have arrived, and these are varieties that are used to hot weather condition. But it hasn't fixed the issue, because they're only allowed to be for Bordeaux Supérieur and Bordeaux AC. You know, this is a part of Bordeaux that is really struggling financially speaking. You know, those poor chateaux that can't make ends meet already, and really the solution is not to plant different grape variety. It's really to help those chateaux in developing, you know, replanting on different rootstocks or different clones of the same varieties, developing canopy management to help with you know, making wines, viticulture that is sustainable in current climate that is changed. So, you know, the viticulture that we knew 30 years ago, 20, even 10 years ago, is not suitable anymore to the climate of nowadays. Okay, so sweet wines. Bordeaux has made sweet wines for a number of centuries now, since the late 1700s, early 1800s, when botrytis was you know, discovered. Discovered is not a term, more harnessed, okay, because actually botrytis was discovered in Hungary, where they make Tokaj. So the Sauternes producers will tell you, well, we've invented botrytis. No, they have not. They harnessed it and making some fantastic wines out of it, of course. So where is the Sauternes area? Sauternes is south of Bordeaux. It's what we call the Sauternes area. Sauternes is a village, essentially. And then you have this is the gold patch that you see on the map there. And you have really three villages that can call themselves Sauternes. You have the village of Sauternes, the village of Barsac, and the village of Serrance as well. But they all can fall into the Sauternes appellation, or they can also have their own name, Barsac appellation or Serrance. But for the commercially minded chateaus, you know, they'll normally put their names under the name of Sauternes because it's more recognizable. So Sauternes, where it is, what does botrytis need to develop? Botrytis needs humidity, warmth and humidity. It's a fungus, okay? So like every fungus, warmth and humidity is what they need to develop and to grow. And the proximity to the Garonne River is of extreme importance there. And I give you an example. You know, a couple of years, more than a couple of years ago now, probably about 5 years ago, there was talks about a new highway, so what we call the autoroute, a new highway being built over the little stream that meets the Garonne River. And that stream is of vital importance because the Garonne River comes from the south of France, from the Mediterranean. It actually is quite warm water. But the Serrance is a river that actually comes from the Atlantic Ocean. We don't see it here on the map, unfortunately, but it meets in between. Think about the stream going through the green patch and actually snaking its way between where the word Barsac and Sauternes are. And it just finishes in the Garonne. And the local authorities, in their wisdom or lack of wisdom, thought, oh, we'll build a highway there, and you know it will actually have an effect on the flow of the Serrance, the Serrance River, but you know we don't mind. Well, outrage in Sauternes, of course, because if you stop the flow of that river, you know it won't have as much botrytis because thermal effect of the warm river of the Garonne, cold river of the Serrance, meeting in autumn is where you get that fog, that mist in the morning. You stop one of them, you're not going to have the same effect anymore. So let me say that the idea of the autoroute changed very quickly. It's been built, but it's gone around. So I mean, Sauternes is, in terms of landscape, it's very similar to Saint-Emilion. In fact, it's quite a gorgeous area, quite hilly. You know, very rural compared to the left bank. You got some beautiful chateaus there still. The soil profile is again, you have a lot of clay under gravel, so again a similarity to parts of the right bank. And as I said, you know, you have that unique mesoclimate of the Serrance River and the Garonne meeting and creating that mist after a long summer that will help botrytis develop. Yields are puny, you know. I mean, 15 hectoliters per hectare, you know, on average, but really in the years leading to 2022, there were 6 or 7 hectoliters per hectare, which is nothing. So when we think about the price point of a bottle of Sauterne nowadays, granted Chateau d'Yquem aside, they're actually really good value for money because high labor cost, low yields, no market for it because besides Australia and England a little bit, not many people drink sweet wines. That's why the Sauterne producers love Australia, because we do actually consume quite a bit of Sauternes here. The minimum alcoholic strength in Sauterne is 13% alcohol, but more often than not nowadays it's more like 14 and a half. And then again, like I said for the right bank, don't forget the lesser appellations. Don't forget the satellites. So you got the Sainte Croix du Mont, you got Loupiac, you got Cadillac. These are the other side of the river, and they're not unfortunately highlighted on that map, but they're literally just across from Bassac and Sauterne, and you have some fantastic wines there, which are often a lot cheaper than Sauterne as well. So botrytis, and we can't really talk about Sauterne without talking about noble rot or Botrytis cinerea, because it first appeared in Sauterne in the 1800s, but as I said before, in Tokaj, he was there about 50 years before that, in Hungary, and really the conditions that are propitious for the development of botrytis is the humid mornings, and then the sunny afternoon. So if you go to Sauterne in autumn, really, it's fascinating. You can go into a vineyard in the morning, and you can't, if you look down, you can't actually see your feet. This is how thick the mist can be. But then the sunshine in the afternoon, in obviously in a good vintage, it doesn't happen every year. The sunny afternoon will burn that fog, that mist, and will then help the botrytis to develop. So grape varieties like Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon and Muscadel are prone to this to botrytis because they've got thin skins. Excuse me. The berries will shrivel and dehydrate because the botrytis will feed on the water within the grape, and that will concentrate the sugar and the acidity of the grapes. And then botrytis, that's a bit of a Bordeaux non-simplified fact. But botrytis has got an antibiotic that actually inhibits fermentation. So the issue is that fermentation for Sauterne wines actually takes a long time. For a dry wine will be about 1 week, 7 days to 8 days. But for a Sauterne, it can be about 6 to 8 weeks, because the yeast will struggle with the amount of sugar to metabolize first and foremost, and that botryticin actually makes life even harder for them. Here's a little video actually to show you the goodness of those botrytis wines. So in Sauterne, when they pick through the vineyard, they won't pick bunches by bunches. Okay, they'll pick grape berry by berry. Okay, so they'll go up each row of vines, and they'll pick each grape that is affected by botrytis, and then they'll come back a couple of days later to see if the remaining grapes have been affected by botrytis, and if so, they'll pick a little bit more. And it can go for 7 or 8 times through each row of vines. So very labor intensive. This is actually on the last day of harvest at Yquem 4 years ago, I think it was. More than that, time flies. 2017. That was the last day of harvest. There were some big storms forecasted. So they actually, on that last day, they picked bunches towards the end. But otherwise, it's berry by berry, and you could see during the video how they kind of a dust come out, and that's the botrytis. And if you eat one of the fruit like that, one of the berry that way, it actually tastes like marmalade, orange marmalade, and saffron and things like that. And that's really, I mean, for those of you who like to play with your with friends and family and blind tasting. And if you don't know what botrytis tastes like, well, remember that, you know, orange marmalade, because you can have a sweet wine, and if it doesn't taste like orange marmalade, it's likely not to be botrytis wines. So here's the fact of the day for you. So as I said, you know, for vinification and maturation, so it's hand picking berry by berry, and we call that tree or tries in English, where you know you go through the rows up and down up to 8 times over a long period of time. It can be, you know, a period of 4 weeks, like in 2022. You know, they waited for botrytis to arrive because it had been a very hot and dry summer, very little humidity in the air, but then rain came in at the right time, probably a little bit late than they would have hoped for, but that brought a lot of humidity in the area, and then that mist started to come to fruition. So as I said, you know, because of the botryticin, you know, it's a slow fermentation, but the fermentation will stop usually on its own when the yeast literally say no more sugar, I can't digest any more sugar. That's when the fermentation will stop. Oak maturation, typically speaking, you know, most Sauternes will be 18 to 24 months in barrel before bottling. Okay. All right, so that's the end of the presentation. And I suggest we do like we did last week, maybe a few minutes to gather our thoughts, and then we'll kind of debrief on all of that. Everyone happy with that? David, what time do you think? 7:45, 7:40?
Is everyone happy with 10 minutes?
So 10 minutes was 7:44. Don't be late.
Please.
All right.
I think Ed stuck off and turned us back.
Are we all on? Yes.
Have we gathered our thoughts?
Yes. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I'm fine. I'm fascinated to know that Australia is one of the biggest drinkers of sweet wines.
Oh yeah, it's a big market for sweet wines, for not only Sauternes, but in sweet wines in general.
It's interesting. I had no idea. I thought.
I think Australia in general is, big drinkers of anything.
Are we? I didn't realise. We probably are.
Yeah, it's look. I mean, the market for sweet wines, and I think we touched on that last week when we talked about the dry whites of Bordeaux. It's a necessity for certain producers nowadays to make dry white wines, and there's some fantastic dry white wines made out of Sauternes. But of course, you can't just forget about the sweet wines, because it is quite those style of Botrytis Sauvignon are very not unique to Bordeaux, because they're made elsewhere in the world as well. But that particular style with that level of sugar and acidity is quite Bordeaux. It's a trademark of Bordeaux, really.
Whereas my question is, who thought, oh, that grey disgusting thing, I'll drink that.
I know, right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, it's such a good point you raise, because I've often thought that as well, and I think what they realize. I mean, there are many tales and stories about how this came to be and so on, but some say that some vineyard owners left their vines to go on holidays and came back. The grapes were rotten, but they could see the birds eating them, and they thought, well, if the birds are eating them, might be good enough. And they tasted them, and they thought, well, that's good, so they turned them into wine. But it's it's an old tale. I don't know, to be honest. I mean, but I totally agree. It's a bit like blue cheese, right? Who would think, oh yeah, it's going to be it'd be fantastic, but some of them are. But yeah, I mean, what gets to me is the labor intensity of making Sauternes or Botrytis wines in general. Especially in nowadays, with challenges like labor shortage and so on. Because labor shortage is everywhere. To actually be able to make wines like this in a year, in a day and age like we are, is difficult. And and I think we touched on that last week, but I mean, I think when we talk about Sauternes, at the moment, especially this year, last year there was bushfires just outside of Sauternes, and I've kind of had that on the back of my mind since then. And then when I went to Bordeaux a couple of weeks ago and tasted a lot of Sauternes, I couldn't help myself but actually see that, or smell, should I say, not see, but smell and taste the effect of smoke taints in those wines. And I'm still actually I feel quite alone in that assessment of the wines, because if you read any of the critics and all of that, they're giving 95 to 96 points. And above that to Sauternes, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's me being stubborn or whatever, but I still reckon that those wines are smoke affected, and it's sad because for 3 vintages, 19, 20, 21, the yields in Sauternes were really appallingly low, and 2022 the yields were actually very good. I went to Sauternes because I was based in Pessac for 5 months, or close to 5 months, and so I went to Sauternes quite a bit. And during autumn onset of botrytis, I could see that there was beautiful bunches, big bunches. You're like, okay, well, great, they're going to have great yields, but I mean, the wines, unfortunately, are not, I don't think, as good as they could be. So it's another challenge of climate change. One of them really, the first challenge after the bushfires were the fact that it was very hot and dry summer. So it really sucks out the humidity in the air. So for botrytis you need humidity. And the drought, obviously the Ciron is a small river, and the Ciron didn't have much water in it. So without that water in that river to meet the Garonne, you don't have the botrytis. You don't have the thermal shock that needed for botrytis. So yeah, that's that's kind of really all about all of those elements that are important to the development of botrytis in the area. If they're not there, well, you make what we call patriage, the shriveled grapes, and the style of the wine is very different. Because as I said before, botrytis brings that kind of that saffron orange marmalade characteristic to the wine, and acidity especially as well. When it's shriveled grapes, only dehydrated grapes, the style of the wine is very different. Very different. The color is different. The aromas are different. It's a bit like the passitos passimentos in Italy and so on, where they're made from dehydrated grapes, which they're delicious wines as well, but the color is different. The aromas are very different. So yeah, it's just they have to adapt essentially.
Daniel, just a couple of questions. One is, do you find that is there any vineyards or any wineries, I suppose, around Sauterne which are potentially wanting to drop out of the appellation so they can then start using New World methods to manipulate the environment? So spraying water to encourage and to make a fake, I suppose, mist or fog to develop botrytis or the right conditions.
That's a great question, David. I haven't heard of any properties wanting to do this. I mean, I think, while it's a good idea, I'm not sure how practical it will be for them, because for Sauternes, they're not even fetching enough money to make ends meet. So imagine stepping out of Sauternes appellation. That would be probably financial suicide, I'd say. Probably the best bet for them would be to concentrate on dry wine making, and including reds. I mean, there's some good terroir for reds as well down there. But to be honest, if they don't make Sauternes and they'll be set for Sauternes for hundreds of years, it's probably either you stop and put some cattle in there, or I mean, it is really to that point really when you think about it. It's quite sad because Bordeaux is going through a time now where a lot of vines are being pulled out. So far the first slice is 10,000 hectares of vines being pulled out, and that's mainly in the Entre-deux-Mers area, the bottom part of the Entre-deux-Mers area, and that's really, geographically speaking, it's very close to Sauternes. Really, it's just the other side of the river. So yeah, but yeah, it's a good idea. I mean, we do it here in Australia with the spraying of the botrytis or the inoculation of botrytis. It obviously works. Yeah.
Just another quick question in regards particular to Sauternes, because I know that there's a big issue with a lot of counterfeit Bordeaux wines. Just recently, those 3 people prosecuted in Shanghai for 60,000 bottles or for $46.5 million US dollars worth of fake wine. Is that still a major issue, or is it a major issue for any wines produced from Sauternes, from that area? Like, is there fake Chateau d'Yquem and things like that, which you are aware of, or is that an issue for that particular style?
It's definitely an issue. It's really only for Chateau d'Yquem though when it comes to Sauternes. I mean, it's really more an issue for the premium reds. It's I've never read about anything about Aubryon Blanc, for example, being faked. But that's just me though. I'm sure someone would have tried that. But for Sauternes, really, it's just Yquem would be the target. The other ones are not expensive enough to warrant a fan club to try and make fake versions of it. But certainly, when you talk about the right bank and counterfeiting is in the world of fine wines. I mean, Bordeaux is a big target. Burgundy even more so nowadays because of the price points that they fetch. But in Bordeaux, the technology around some of the bottles is just incredible to protect against counterfeiting. I mean, we import Petrus in Australia, and some of the things that the procedures that we've got to fulfill to ensure, we keep records of everything in terms of, shipping dates, the bottle numbers, the ink they use on the labels is they use the same ink that banks would use on their banknotes for printing. There is NHS technology in the neck of the bottle, so it's a microchip emitting a low wave, a low signal wave. Some of them have got a microchip in a label. It's incredible. Lasered, the bottle lasered inside with the actual unique number and all of that. So it's pretty crazy what we come across nowadays to try and combat counterfeiting. Yeah. So, and things like I mean, not only in France. I mean, Opus One in Napa has got some uses the technology that I just mentioned about the banknote ink and so on, and they have a authentifier, I think they call it, where it looks like 3D glasses to ensure you can see the holograms of the heads of Parker and not Parker, Baron Philippe de Rothschild and Mondavi which are the founders of the winery. So yeah, it's some of the techniques is pretty cool, really.
Excellent. Gemma, or Anne, do you have any questions in regards to? No, nothing. Now, in regards to, I suppose, Bordeaux, where do you find, especially like I suppose Sauternes, you mentioned it's a very small market, there's changes to the environment due to global warming and stuff, other than potentially just going to a still wine or looking at potentially maybe going to a red wine. Do you see it modifying or changing or trying to do something else outside of the box, or try to create a new product or?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you go to Bordeaux, and nowadays a lot of the wine bars will offer Sauternes spritz or Sauternes tonic and things like that. I mean, you go to Portugal and you have a white port and tonic, every street corners, and it's quite delicious. And Sauternes is the same. They try to kind of revamp the brand. Use Sauternes as a part of a cocktail and so on. I mean, don't get me wrong though. Still the big names still sell. They sell slower than they'd like, of course, but they still sell and command high prices. But it's more for the kind of the lesser known chateaus. So it's really to try and move stock in a way that wasn't designed to in the first place, or wasn't thought about in the first place. But also they've really developed œnotourism. So to have a really good time in Bordeaux, you really have to go into Sauternes as well. I mean, some of the best hotels and restaurants within chateaus, not hotels but B&Bs, within chateaus, and they're so hospitable because they're so grateful that people go and visit them. So it is a glorious part of Bordeaux, even if you go for an overnight, because let's face it, how much sweet wine can you have, over the day? Yeah. So, and that's what the tragedy of sweet wines in general is. It's how much sweet wines do we drink, in these days? Is it because of a conscious, health consciousness, or the fact we don't like sweet things? Or I mean, I guarantee you, if you drink that bottle of sweet wine tonight, you'll fall asleep first, but then you'll be awake within an hour because there's so much sugar in it. So yeah, it's like an espresso martini. I think I said that last week. It makes you fall asleep, but you're awake because of the caffeine. Well, it's the same with Sauternes.
And do you see the future of Bordeaux taking on any other, like in general, just the whole area? And I know it's a very, very, very big area. Do you see that Bordeaux investing or taking on other types of alcoholic style beverages other than wine, trying to establish other lines to use their grapes, etc.?
Yeah, look, definitely. I mean, there is like everywhere else, you know, there is a gin distillery and brandies and so on, but gin is pretty big in Bordeaux. There's one actually in my humble opinion, and I'm no you know, expert in gin and spirits in general, but I mean, besides the diploma, that's all. I don't think I've ever studied the spirits after that, but. The best gin distillery in Bordeaux is the one that you find in the city center. It's I'll type it. It's in Bassin-à-Flot. I forget the name of the actual distillery itself, but it's part of Bassin-à-Flot. This is the old German submarine base that they had built during the war, and it's really cool what they've redone there. And it's a building that's never going to be destroyed because they can't. Yeah, it's that much concrete there that. You know, that it's indestructible. That's why the German built it. But I mean, they've turned out part of it in a museum and part of it is in a distillery. It's a really, really nice area of Bordeaux to visit nowadays. Quite industrial. You've got the Cité du Vin, I'll type that as well, to go and visit, because that's the wine museum that was opened, I think, when did it open? That's 2016 or 2017, I think. And it truly is a beautiful museum to visit. It's not only about Bordeaux wine, it's about wine in general, the history of wine, and there is a sensory room where you can go in and they have aromas that synthesize under like a glass cloche. And you can see, you know, okay, what does this smell like, and you know, it really helps actually to understand wine and how to smell it and appreciate it. So yeah. Yeah, so I mean, you know, Bordeaux, I think, really is a kind of a lot of producers have started to make white wine again, which is interesting. And you know, even if it's in small quantities, a lot more white wine is produced in Bordeaux. I mean, you know, last year, Château Angélus started to release to produce a white wine that, you know, it's crazy expensive. But you know, that's they play on their brand that way, I guess. But there's some really delicious white wines in most chateaus that you wouldn't think they would produce such a wine, but you know, there's some lovely surprises there for sure. But I think the biggest shift that I've seen with regards to Bordeaux, I mean, when I grew up there, you know, as a city, it was really dirty and not really inviting to tourism, to nowadays being really kind of you know, beautiful. You know, everything has been cleaned up. There's an amazing tram system there that is kind of world class, and tourism, like winery visits and all that, that's really changed. You know, Bordeaux in the past was known for being really close to business, whereas now really most chateaus offer visits. You know, for the top ones, you've got to make appointments, but you know, they are open for visits. Yeah, just not Sundays. You know, in France, nothing is open on Sundays.
And if you're going to Bordeaux, which I believe you might be doing, you should maybe speak to Daniel about maybe trying to get a good visit to one of the top wineries. Sorry, Daniel, I'm going to throw that at you.
Actually, I'm not going to Bordeaux. I'm actually I'm going to Burgundy, which is a problem. But I'm sure you'll be able to help me with Burgundy.
The other B word.
No, I'm totally fascinated by all of this, and I'm thinking, how can I get to Bordeaux too?
Look, Bordeaux is easy, accessible from nowadays. Honestly, it's since 2018 they have there is the high speed, the direct high speed railway line. I think 18 or 19 it started, and I take it all the time when I go to France. It's 2 hours and 4 minutes Paris Montparnasse to Bordeaux, you know, center to city center, and it's really brilliant. You know, it's it's cheaper and faster than taking the plane. Essentially, when you take into account you got to check in at the airport and all that. So
anything's faster than planes. I've just looked at that museum that you were discussing, the wine museum. It is an amazing building in such itself, isn't it? I mean, you know, the architecture of that, let alone anything else. So.
Yeah, they wanted to make it look like a wine swirling in the glass.
That's what it looks like. Yes.
Yeah. Some people said it said the terms not as enchanting, but yeah, the swirl of the swirl of the wine in a glass. Yeah, it really is a very well made museum actually, and there's always kind of exhibitions, there are temporary exhibitions within it from different regions of the world and different producers and so on. So.
Well, I think I'm going to have to find some time to get to Bordeaux because I'm totally fascinated by the whole thing.
Just a quick question. Do you know any supply? Do you know where you can get any Cremant de Bordeaux? I haven't seen any in Australia. I've only ever seen it once in New York. I've never really seen it here. Can you get it over here?
In Australia, nobody is mad enough to bring it in. Look, I mean, there are some good Cremant de Bordeaux nowadays. There might be actually maybe the other Bordeaux might bring some. I don't know. It's called the other Bordeaux. I mean, look, it's a product that is as a Cremant de Bordeaux. It's going to be made with Semillon and Sauvignon Blanc. A sparkling wine made out of Semillon Sauvignon Blanc is not as nice, really, as made with the traditional varieties like Chardonnay or even Chenin Blanc. But I mean, even in Bordeaux, we don't see it, to be honest.
When I was in New York, I did say the Cremant Bordeaux was like a rosé color. So would that then be just for Cabernet Franc, or would that be from?
Yes, Cabernet Franc. Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes they use Merlot, but Merlot doesn't have enough facility, so it's usually Cabernet Franc. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, ladies, have you had a Cremant de Loire, Cremant de Bordeaux? It's like a beautiful sparkling wine. It's a traditional method.
So it's Cremant is the answer to traditional method when Champagne was getting very strict with using the method champenoise term and so on. So you're not allowed to use method champenoise anymore. And then they started saying to people, well, you can't call your wine method champenoise, so you got to call it method traditional. But for the Champagne producer, it wasn't strict enough, so they wanted anybody else that made sparkling wines using their method in France to call themselves Cremant. So in each of the traditional wine regions of France, you have a Cremant. So but it has to use the local varieties. So or a predominance. I think from memory is 85% of predominant grape varieties from your area. So in Bordeaux, you'd have to use a minimum of 85% Semillon or Sauvignon Blanc. Typically, it would be Sauvignon Blanc because it's got higher acidity, which is essential for making quality sparkling wines. And then the rest in Bordeaux would be Uni Blanc or Colomba, part of the blend.
We may have lost Daniel. Let's try to get him back. Ladies, while we're trying to get Daniel back, did you have any questions? Oh, sorry, Anne, you're on mute.
No, I'm sorry about that. I just realised that. No, I think not really. I don't know. I was just interested also in the making of fake wines when you were discussing that. That was, is that a big thing in China?
Oh, well, around the world, but China, obviously there's a very, very large market, and Bordeaux is a very premium, obviously, brand or recognition. And so that tends to be quite high, but you can get fake Bordeaux for fake Burgundies, etc., in other countries as well.
My
unfortunately, that's okay.
He's back.
Sorry, I have no idea what happened. I was talking and it just shut down in front of me. Where we
I
are,
was just asking
Cremant,
about
yeah. With Cremant, so and in Burgundy you'd have a Cremant de Bourgogne, which is predominantly Chardonnay, or in fact, mostly Chardonnay, and I'm sure they put a bit of Pinot Blanc in there. But in Alsace, it's Riesling or Muscat, or so you've got to use kind of your local varieties. So. There's some really good wines out of that that category. Often better than basic champagne.
Just a quick question. Man was just asking why he was slightly frozen and trying to join back in. Is it with the counterfeit wines? Obviously, identified Big Bust in China. How widespread is this around the world? Is it a really big issue in Europe as well and other parts? Or is it just pretty much only some select countries?
Look, the counterfeited wines usually are manufactured in Asian countries, the Philippines, China, Thailand, or this kind of Korea, Vietnam, and kind of will filter through to other countries, but. There's some really professional teams and forensic people actually. That's their job to actually protect consumers against counterfeited wines. But they as the smarter they get, the smarter the people who make
like everything, yeah,
as well. So. Yeah, I mean, for those of you who haven't look, it might be a little bit outdated now, but I mean, there's a show called it's a documentary called Sour Grapes. I'll put it in the chat box because that's it's I think it's still on Netflix, and it's about a guy called Rudy Curry-Nowen, who's incidentally actually got out of jail last year, and he's the main culprit on that documentary. But it's really interesting to watch. I can't recommend it enough. And because the thing is, he was a smart counterfeiter, but he's also like a genius taster. So obviously to make wines, taste like some old Burgundies or old Bordeaux, and actually get away with it, you've got to have a pretty good palate. And I guess towards the end he got caught because he got a little bit cocky. He got a little bit too sure of himself. But yeah, he spent 8 years in jail in America, and when he got released, he went back to the Philippines, Philippines, or yeah, that's right, that's where he's from. But yeah, so regularly you'll hear about a bust with a few years ago, I think it was just at the early onset of COVID, when they busted an offshore bottling line with literally on a boat, and they were counterfeiting bottles on a boat in the Chinese Sea and all of that. So yeah, you see them for sure.
Wow. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
It'd be very hard as a consumer if you're not familiar. You go out for a nice restaurant, special occasion, you decide to drop a few $100s on a wine, or even more. You've never had it before, and you might get a counterfeit. So it is a big issue. I've never come across any counterfeit Australian wines that I've heard of, but there might be other as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it would happen with Australian wines as well. I mean, any fine wines, really, any fine products. I mean, it's the same with the Chanel handbag or Louis Vuitton or whatever. You'll find them you'll find them anywhere. Really, it's just, I guess, about being aware of it. And I mean, I've assessed some private cellars here in Melbourne, in fact, where I'm like, this. I'm sure this is not right, and it might be often it's in the name, it's in the typing. They often there'll be typos in the name, or there might be kind of two names morphed together. But for the best ones, it's really in the finer details. The quality of the ink used, or the cork. I mean, once I found a bottle of Lafite that quite simply it said it was a Lafite from the 1960s. I can't remember the exact vintage, but the cork looked very new. You could see that the cork was, you know, really bright, quite white really, and it's like, okay, well, obviously there's a problem here. And then and the neck of the bottle, then you could see that the old lead capsule was had been kind of stuck together again. I mean, it was really well done, I have to say. But I mean, yeah, if you've got to have the eyes for this this kind of things.
Unbelievable. I had no idea. Okay.
Do you want to walk us through some of the wines today as well that they are drinking? I'm alcohol-free at the moment. It's my favourite thing.
Yeah,
but it's okay.
absolutely. So there was two wines that were recommended for tonight. One of them was Croix Canon, the Saint-Emilion Grand Cru.
Yeah.
And this is second label from Chateau Canon, which is quite a famous estate in Saint-Emilion, just on the outskirts of the village of Saint-Emilion, in fact. It's 5 minutes walk, even if that. And that's owned by Chanel, actually, the fashion house. Same
This is owned by Chanel.
Yeah.
Is that one of those satellite little AOCs that you mentioned?
No, that's a Saint-Emilion, that one. Yeah, yeah. It's just that this is the second label. This is a vine that they train and farm differently and separately to Chateau Canon. And it just makes it's kind of on the foot of the escarpment, so it makes wines a little bit more deeper in color and a little bit more higher in alcohol. But it's such an elegant wine as well. 2017, that vintage from memory. Yeah, it's just really lovely drinking. It's quite it's what we call a classic vintage because it was a little bit cooler as a vintage. Wasn't super hot as well. So it just made wines that are elegant and easy to drink. Easy to drink now. And on this, you're on the Merlot dominance. It's 85% Merlot, and then the balance for memory is Cabernet Franc. There's no Cabernet Sauvignon in Croix Canon. And then the Sauterne, or it's actually technically is a Barsac, that one. Doisiden is one of my favorite, to be honest, for educational purposes, because it's always very, very good quality. Price point is is very fair, and Doisiden has got kind of that. Barsac is a little bit heavier, normally, like a bit more richer than some classic Sauternes, but it's got such a lovely freshness and acidity, kind of that spicy ginger, characteristic that it just gives a lot of balance to the wine. And the best sweet wines have got to have a lot of acidity, because if you don't have enough acidity, the wine will be out of balance, But if you notice, the wine doesn't have what we call cloyiness. It doesn't leave any sweetness left on the palate. The acidity just cleans the palate up, and the best wines will make you want to have another glass. Yeah, and that's the case with this, really.
It's delicious.
Yeah, it's great vintage as well in Sauternes. It's probably one of the best ones in the last 2 decades, actually. Yeah,
2016.
Yeah, 2016. Overall, that was probably Bordeaux's outstanding vintage of the last since 2010. And I say outstanding because it was a good vintage in everywhere in Bordeaux. Some vintages are good left bank vintage, and some of them are really good right bank vintage, and some of them are really good Sauternes vintage. But it's rare when it's good everywhere. The Sauternes normally doesn't benefit from the same climatic conditions than the rest. So 2013 was an amazing vintage for Sauternes, for example. But for everywhere else it was shocking. But in 2013, Sauternes absolutely had an amazing vintage. 2022, I mean, everyone can make their own opinion. For me, I found that the vintage was better on the right bank, Saint-Emilion especially, and that's because, to me, it made sense because of the water retention of the limestone and the clay there actually helped the vintage. On the left bank, it was a little bit more variable. There were some really, really good wines on the left bank as well, but it wasn't as homogeneous as as on the right bank. But yes, it's a nice pair. It's a nice pair of wines, and I think that shows. And then next week you'll see a very different style of wines because you have a Merlot dominant wines, and Merlot dominant wines are usually made to be, or not made, but they're approachable earlier because Merlot is softer. It doesn't have as much tannins. And then next week you'll see a style of wine that is from the left bank, so it's Cabernet dominant. It will have notes, aromas that are very different, or quite different than what you have tonight. Tonight's more on that red fruit spectrum, and then next week will be more, cassis fruit, blackcurrant, and be what we call leafiness to it. And that's because Cabernet Sauvignon has got a lot of that kind of blackcurrant and leafy characteristic on unripe vintages or cooler vintages. Some people can say it smells like tomato leaves, but not this one. Actually, 2016 was an amazing vintage for that. So yeah, it's quite. This is really where it's a lot of fun to talk about the difference between the different parts of Bordeaux, because you go to a restaurant now and then you're like, okay, well, I feel like something a little bit more fleshy, a bit a bit not too tannic and so on. So I'm probably going to go towards the right bank Bordeaux. So you look at Saint-Emilion, you look at Pomerol, and you look at those areas on the wine list. But if you feel like something with regards to you want more tannins and you want more power in terms of when I say power, more like acidity and food friendliness, you probably want to go towards Cabernet dominant left bank. So on the right bank, for example, the Merlots, it goes really well, sorry, with things like Confit duck or goose, beef, but different cuts of beef to the left bank, and that's because you got less tannins on the right bank. So you want something that is a little bit not as fatty in the beef department. You might go with a Scotch fillet or an eye fillet even. But on the left bank, left bank is tannins. You got a lot of Cabernet component in there, so you got a lot of tannins. So you will want to go more with towards lamb, which has got a lot of fat in there. You want to go towards other cuts of beef, even Wagyu to some extent. And it's really interesting because both banks, even though it's the same region, but the foods are quite different. Pauillac, they salt bush lamb in Pauillac, and as such, lamb and Pauillac is just incredible. And then there is the Bazas beef there for those of you who go to France, and that Bazas is the town south of Bordeaux, south of Sauternes, in fact, where they have a very old breed of beef or cattle, should I say, that makes an incredible cut of meat. They are old cattle, so the meat is a lot stronger in flavor and a bit chewier. But as French, we like to actually, we like the chewy cut of meat. So that's so like a nice amount of tannins to go with that is perfect.
Very good.
And obviously, they say that obviously Sauternes and foie gras go hand in hand. What other types of dishes would you potentially looking to have on Sauternes?
With Sauternes, I mean, it's funny. So often we'd start the meal with Sauternes, in fact, as an aperitif, and then we finish with champagne. So it's kind of the other way around. But it depends the day. I mean, the traditional Sunday lunch in Sauternes is roast chicken with Sauternes, and that goes really well. Because I don't know, that kind of saltiness of the roast chicken with the Sauternes goes really well. Personally, I like it with cheese as well, like blue cheese and washed rind cheese. It works a treat with that. And with foie gras, it's kind of the very traditional match, and it does work. But I do prefer it with cheese, to be honest. I've had it with many things because a few number of years ago now, there was I played host to Chateau Coutet here in Australia for a couple of weeks, and we did some events around Australia, and we had entire meals around Sauternes wines, and we had it with roast pork, and with the kind of the apple sauce that worked really well. Roast chicken. We had it with lobster as well. It works really well with lobster, and that's because Aline, who's the co-owner of Kuteshi, she's French, but she grew up in Boston, and there's a lot of lobsters over there, and so with the lobster rolls, it worked really, really well. I wasn't a fan of oysters and Sauternes, but some people loved it. I wasn't. I didn't really understand it, to be honest with you. But it does work well with shellfish because kind of that sweetness and saltiness that kind of balance with Sauternes. That's why a lot of them call themselves gold wines and not, they can't stand the term dessert wines. They don't like it over there. Because they're like, oh, you can't pigeonhole us with just dessert. Yeah, well, sure, but most people do, so. Yeah.
Must have been quite interested to try the combination with the lobster roll and the chicken. Not for you, Anne?
I like the idea. Yeah, I'm doing the roast chicken with the Sauternes. I think that'd be. Yeah, we've got a special lunch coming up in 2 weeks, so it'd be interesting to see what I might come up with. We'll have the Sauternes with cheese before everyone starts and finish with the champagne.
Yeah, look, I mean, cheese and Sauternes works for me. It really does. I just like the.
If you have a cheese with the Sauternes, what sort of cheese would you be recommending?
Blue.
A blue cheese.
Yeah, definitely blue.
So it's got to have a strong.
And I have that argument with my parents every time I go to France and I see them. Especially my dad. He's like, "Well, I'm French. I drink red wine with my cheese." I'm like, "Sure, but there's other options out there." And my dad is Bordeaux born and bred. All right, so yeah, it's hard to make him drink anything else than red Bordeaux wines in the first place. Yeah, so. I have this friendly argument with him very often. It's like, try this. No, I won't. Okay, sure.
Sounds amazing.
Because blue cheese and red wine, it's like in your mouth. It goes like it's like with that aluminum foil flavor. Really metallic flavor. But you put sweet wine with a glass of port, Tawny port, or with blue cheese works a treat. It's perfect.
Oh, I think my menu is going to be interesting.
Tell us what you send us a message. Tell us what you're doing in the next couple of weeks.
Actually, I think it's yeah. Okay.
Does anyone have any last minute questions or anything for Daniel?
No.
So
not me. I found it.
So next week we'll look at the left bank, and it will be, and then we'll wrap it up with kind of trying to debrief on everything. But I mean, next week it's going to be a little bit more commerce focused, so that you can, I guess, have a few names to think about, and to understand why and how the market, the commercializations of wines of Bordeaux works, because it's quite a unique style or a unique system really of commercialization. And after I finish after we finish the session in a few minutes, I'll start getting onto the phone with Bordeaux now, because of the on-premise system being in full swing. And this is when the new vintage releases, and then I send our offers twice daily, once at night, once in the morning. And this is when you start really to see how unique a system it is, in terms of the on-premise system, and then the wines have hit the market in 2 years' time, and where the market is for these kind of wines, at what price level, and what are the challenges facing this system, and it's and what are the advantages of this system. So it's really quite interesting to talk about it. I'm really looking forward to that session because it's I love the Left Bank of Bordeaux. I love Cabernet. It's my favorite grape variety, Cabernet Sauvignon, and just in all its kind of forms, and not only Bordeaux wines. I like wine in general, but yeah. Cabernet from anywhere.
Never have guessed.
Give me a Coonawarra or Margaret River or I'll be very grateful. So yeah, it's
Can I ask a quick question? Do you get many Australian Cabernets over in France, and how are they received?
I always bring Australian wines with me when I go to France, and we usually exchange with friends or in the industry, and they absolutely they really are well received. The only thing is the only kind of downfall is that they're often misunderstood, and that's simply because there is not a lot of Australian wines in Europe, except UK is not part of Europe anymore, but outside of UK. There's not really access to Australian wines, not even in Switzerland or really. I mean, London is or the UK in general. You'll find whatever you want from Australia, but in France, it's it's the same in Italy. I mean, in France you drink French wines, in Italy you drink Italian wines, in Spain and yeah. So it's that's the only downside to that. But every time I bring a bottle of Australian wines and people open it and we share it together. Or I leave it with them, and they always will come back with some positive feedback. And especially if it's a Shirazes, and I said, do not drink that Shiraz at lunchtime, like because people they have a big lunch in France, yeah. So because otherwise you'll have a sleep, And I've got an industry friend who goes like, yeah, my siesta was a bit longer than usual. Yeah. So
Fantastic. Well, thank you for tonight.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure having everyone on board again. Now, once again, this recording will take about 24 hours to come down through my little feed, and I'll put it up, the link into the Moodle. And if you prefer me to email that, just let me know. I don't know if you get the copy of that in your chat feed as well. So maybe check your chat. It may be there, may not be. I've got it in mind just from last week. And any other questions before we finish up?
No.
You don't have to drink all the Sauternes tonight. You can keep the cork back on it, and it will last in the fridge for a few days, so no problems.
Excellent. I look forward to tomorrow night then. What do you think? It's my sleeping pill that won't make me sleep.
Exactly.
Won't let me stay asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much for joining us, and then I look forward to see you next week.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, David. Goodbye. Good night.